Joining me now, NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor and NBC News legal affairs correspondent Gary Grumbach, who's outside the D.C. Armory. So, Yamiche, let's start with you. Attorney General Bondi met with D.C.'s Mayor Bowser today. Are we getting a sense of what the level of coordination is there between DOJ and the city with this takeover of the police force?
We are getting a sense of what this is going to look like on the ground. The mayor went into that meeting with very few details. She hadn't been briefed really on what the president wanted to happen on the ground in the city that she's, of course, been tasked and elected to lead. What we know is that the National Guard, from all our understanding, and I just talked to a White House official about this, they're not going to be arresting people or really performing any sort of law enforcement duties in the way that we think the police act when it comes to crime. Instead, they're going to be sort of supporting that role. A White House official just told me they're going to be ensuring that there's a safe environment to make arrests. So if someone is caught doing something illegal, the National Guard might hold you. But then if there is no local police around, you'll then be essentially arrested by local police once they get on the ground, even though the idea is that this coordination means that you're going to have federal law enforcement and city law enforcement working hand in hand together on the street. So you're going to see a local police officer standing next to a National Guard. Another thing someone from the mayor's office told me is that while there is a lot of concern about what this might mean long term, while the mission is 30 days, there is this also wondering whether or not the sort of local police are going to be able to really be empowered to continue doing their job the way that they've been doing them. The mayor still, I think, has some questions about that in terms of chain of command. So we're watching closely to see all this play out. One other thing, Ryan, we've been really asking sort of where are these people, where are these federal officials and law enforcement officials going to be? While they won't say really clearly sort of here are the zones, my understanding is that it is going to be hot spots. It's not going to be in residential areas, and that they are leaning on the local police to really tell them where federal law enforcement officials should go. Ryan? And
let's talk about the position that Mayor Bowser finds herself in at this moment. She's repeatedly pointed out the limitations of D.C.'s power and, by extension, her power as mayor. How much does she really need the federal government, and not just specifically about this issue, but some broader issues that the city is working on?
Well, Ryan, I'm going to take off my White House hat and put on my local reporter hat. As a longtime D.C. reporter, I've covered the mayor a bit here. And what you have is both the confluence of where she was before all of this. D.C. is so unique in that the federal government already has so much power. The president can already do so much by statute in this city, like already take control of the National Guard. You already have a city like Washington, D.C., where there are already a number of federal agencies operating within their borders. Think of Park Police and all these other things. So you already have Muriel Bowser was already trying to not get into conflict with President Trump because she knew essentially that he could overstep her at any time. He could take and do a federal takeover at any moment. So that's something that she's been trying to balance. But then you have local politics here. Maybe people don't know, but the Commanders, the football team that Washington, D.C. cheers for, except for my husband, who's an Eagles fan, the Commanders, they're looking for a new stadium. And the mayor has essentially brokered this deal and gotten the city council behind it to bring the Commanders back into the city right now. I think they gather in Virginia for training, and then they have their games in Maryland. She wants to bring at least the games to D.C. So she's hoping that the president gets behind that. So that's something that the mayor's also trying to get behind while she's dealing with, of course, this law enforcement issue as well, Ryan.
Okay, and of course, that armory where the National Guard is gathering right outside of RFK Stadium, where that new stadium is scheduled to go. Yamiche, thank you for that. And speaking of the Armory, let's move to Gary Grumbach, who is there at the Armory. He could probably see RFK Stadium from where he is right now. Gary, what more do we know about this National Guard deployment? And do we have any more of a sense of how the chain of command will work in conjunction with the other agencies on the ground?
Yeah, we are seeing a steady stream of folks arriving to the National Guard. In fact, we see some behind me right now arriving with some duffel bags here, and they are arriving for the next 30 days. They're going to be here at the Armory, and they're going to be living here while they're going out and supporting federal law enforcement across the city of Washington. Now, there's been a lot of complaints from folks in federal law enforcement about what exactly they're going to be doing in assisting with Metropolitan Police and others around the city. President Trump announced this big announcement yesterday at about 11 a.m., and then meetings were held across the federal government as to exactly what ATF, what FBI, how Homeland Security would be involved in all of these actions. So that is something that will play out over the next few weeks here on the streets of Washington. But just to give a reality check here of what D.C. looks like right now, I was driving around quite a bit around the city earlier this morning. It looks like any other day in Washington, D.C. You're not seeing National Guard stacked up on every street corner. You're not seeing federalized law enforcement all over the place. There are certain pockets, Union Station, the big train station here in Washington, some of the other big social hangouts where there are some individuals from federal law enforcement that are certainly based, but that's not on every street corner, and that's certainly not what we're seeing. Plus, I think it's important to note here, Ryan, as putting on a local news reporter hat as well, some of the biggest issues with crime in Washington, D.C. are not happening right next to the Washington Monument, but they're happening in some of the more residential areas of the city. Ryan?
And it's our understanding that the Guard really doesn't have any enforcement power, right? Are they serving more as a backup, or maybe as part of their function here just to see as many people as possible in uniforms and in big military vehicles to basically just try and deter people from committing crimes?
I think it's a little bit of both there, Ryan. I think what we saw in Los Angeles with those immigration protests and the California National Guard that was put out there, it's a lot what we're going to see here. They're certainly going to be there assisting with law enforcement. They're going to be helping with crowd control if that's necessary. Right now, that's not necessary. They're going to be helping with perimeter control around federal buildings if that's necessary. Right now, that does not appear to be necessary. But they're certainly going to be available should that happen. And there's 800 of them that are arriving to the Armory behind me to help make that happen. Ryan.
Okay, Gary Grumbach on the ground outside the D.C. Armory. Gary, thanks for that. Let's bring in now the chair of the D.C. City Council, Phil Mendelson, to talk more about this. Councilman, the National Guard has been deployed to your city today. I mean, what is your understanding of their role, and what kind of communication have they had with local and federal law enforcement?
My understanding is that they will be providing logistical support, sort of behind the scenes, maybe some posted on the streets, but as your reporter just pointed out, there's not a lot of need for that, especially in the downtown areas. So it's, I was briefed yesterday by the chief of police, and it wasn't until the weekend that there was any discussion between any of the federal agencies and our Metropolitan Police Department about how they were going to coordinate. And it's interesting that even though this is supposedly a takeover of our local law enforcement, it's actually they're looking to our local police department for guidance on how to be helpful.
The D.C. Council yesterday released a statement saying that this is, quote, a manufactured intrusion, and that calling in the Guard was unnecessary. But I want you to take a listen to what one D.C. resident told me early this morning about the National Guard deployment, and then you can respond. Take a listen.
Sure.
I think they are here because the D.C. Council failed us. I think it's time, instead of looking at the D.C. National Guard, that we look at the D.C. Council and say, do your job. We are here because they wrote laws that told juveniles to go misbehave. So instead of pointing fingers at the National Guard, it's time to point fingers at the D.C. Council and say, do your job, write the laws, hold people accountable, and then we aren't going to be where we are today.
What's your response to her and to some other residents who have similar frustrations, particularly about juvenile crime and dealing with that?
Well, there certainly are some residents who are disgruntled with local government, but the reality is that crime is the lowest it has been this century. Crime this year is down, violent crime is down 26% compared to last year. If you look at violent crime over the last 10 years, it's down 43%. There were 3,469 violent crimes committed last year. That's 3,469 individuals, victims who have really bad stories to tell, no question about it. But overall, we are reducing crime, and this city is not the pandemic of rampant lawlessness, which is what the president said in his announcement yesterday. It's a false narrative. It's a manufactured crisis. I think it's because he can do here what he can't do in California or any other state because of our unique relationship. And so he is doing here, or trying to do here, what he tried to do in California, bring out the National Guard, and also to so-called federalize our police force.
I understand the president's rhetoric aside and how he can often be overblown when he tries to latch onto an issue. And I understand where you're coming from when it comes to these statistics. But these are average, everyday Washington, D.C. residents. This woman that I talked to this morning is a Democrat, and she doesn't feel safe right now. I mean, what do you say to those folks who you can read the statistics to them over and over again, but they still don't have a sense of safety in their city? And what can you do to make sure that the trend line that you're working on in terms of those crime statistics continues to go down, but at the same time gives a sense of security to the people you represent?
Well, that trend line is going down. Now, I live in the city and I feel safe in the city, but I get it that there are some who don't feel safe. And that is a duty of government to address that and try to make folks feel safe or safer. I don't know anything about this individual, whether she was victimized or whether she knows someone who was, and maybe not. But, you know, when it comes to crime, there is how people perceive and what the reality is. And perception is clearly a challenge, and we need to make folks feel safer. The president's rhetoric, though, makes the challenge harder for us. If the president of the United States stands at a podium and says that Washington, D.C. is lawless, then we have to spend our time talking about statistics, which is kind of boring. But the fact is we are not lawless. Now, she was criticizing the council. The fact is that the council just strengthened our juvenile curfew law a month ago. We have passed two major crime bills that everybody has complimented that have strengthened some crimes and also made it easier to hold individuals and juveniles pending trial. These are actions that the council has taken in the last 2 years to actually make our laws tougher and enable our police to be able to do more. There are other issues that are making crime fighting difficult, such as we have judicial vacancies that we are relying on the federal government to appoint. And the fact that there is a large number of cases, arrests that the police make that the U.S. attorney declines to prosecute. Changing those dynamics will actually help us with fighting crime.
And then finally, the Attorney General and the mayor met today. The mayor said that the city needs to take advantage of these federal resources. I know you weren't supportive of the president's move, but is there an opportunity here to at least curb crime over this 30-day period and take advantage of that situation?
Well, I want to say crime is being curbed. It is down. However, your question about resources, yes, we welcome resources. Now, there's been a lot of collaboration between federal agencies and the district and our local police for years. But if they're going to add additional resources, that can be a good thing. Adding resources is a little different than federalizing our police department. I would agree. I do agree with the mayor that additional resources are welcome and will help us further.
Quickly, before we go, the House Oversight Committee says that they're planning to hold a hearing next month. They'd like to invite you, the mayor, and the D.C. Attorney General, Brian Schwab. Do you plan on attending that hearing?
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it because any chance we have to present the reality, what's actually going on, is welcome.
Okay. Chair Phil Mendelson of the D.C. City Council. Chairman, we appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.